everybody. Welcome back to our show. I am very delighted to have Paul Graziano with us. Some call him Paul Revere. Why is he called Paul Revere? It's because he's been putting community boards and local civic organizations on high alert. His message is, the developers are coming. The developers are coming to tear down your homes and replace them with apartment houses. What is this alert about? It's a plan by our dear Mayor Adams to tear down small outer borough communities in order to allow the largest New York City developers to build high-rises in their place in the outer boroughs. In the name of right-sounding words, foster vibrant neighborhoods. Doesn't it sound beautiful? Relocate small businesses so they can be near their customers. Create gentle density and missing middle housing. Oh yes, build housing that is more affordable. Watch out, when you hear that word affordable, watch out. They are calling this zoning package the City of Yes. People listen to the bright-sounding words. They don't think, what does it mean? They are blinded by its brightness. They only hear hope. They do not research into what has already happened when those bright-sounding words have been put into effect. Today, Paul Graziano is going to help us find out what those bright-sounding words actually mean.
My name is Paul Graziano. I'm an urban planner, zoning and land use expert. I'm from Flushing, Queens, about 15 minutes away. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. Born and bred, lived there my whole life. And I'm here to talk about, while we can touch on the Metro North because it's sort of very related to what's going on, I'm here to talk about tonight about the City of Yes, which is Mayor Adams's and the Department of City Planning's proposal to basically destroy all low-density neighborhoods in the city of New York. So I want to give a little bit of an arc so that everybody kind of understands where we are, okay? Many of you, how many folks have been living here for 10 years? Raise your hand. Okay, 20 years.
Forever.
30 years. 40 years. 50 years. Okay, good. How about 50 plus years? That's great. So, back about 25 years ago, there was a movement across the city for communities like Pelham Gardens and Allerton and other places, Throgs Neck and Riverdale and other places in the Bronx and across the city to contextually rezone their communities. Now, why was this? Because back in 1961, when the zoning resolution was created, replacing the 1916 zoning that was in place from 1916 to 1961, areas were generally zoned. So areas around here were zoned for lower density multifamily housing. The result of that was that a lot of areas ended up being single or two family homes were replaced with row houses or apartment buildings, etc. So this was happening all over the city. It was happening where I live in Queens, it was happening in Staten Island and Brooklyn. And basically, there was this citywide movement to say to our elected officials, we need to do something about this. And under the Bloomberg administration, many, many areas were contextually rezoned. This is one of those areas. So I found the article that came out sorry. Can't see the buttons on here. My mistake, hold on. There we go. There we go. This is from 19 years ago, when Pelham Gardens was rezoned. contextually rezoned. 3 Bronx neighborhoods rezoned. New plan for Pelham Gardens, Laconia, and Baychester. The City Council approved the proposed rezoning of 163 blocks in the Bronx, covering portions of Pelham Gardens, Laconia, and Baychester, located north of Pelham Parkway and east of Williamsbridge and Boston Roads. The new zoning is designed to preserve the existing neighborhood's character with lower density and contextual districts and to prevent out-of-character development. The neighborhood zoning, R32, R4, and R5, has allowed for row house development and multifamily apartments, which the planning department found incompatible with the scale of existing homes in the neighborhoods. The planning department proposed downzoning some areas and slightly increasing the permitted size of development in other areas, primarily along Gun Hill Road and in proximity to the number 5 subway line station, which could support increased density. The commercial zoning along Gun Hill Road was also modified to increase the type of retail uses permitted as of right and encourage new mixed-use development. The full council approved on July 27th, 2005 by a vote of 44 in the affirmative, with 7 council members excused. I don't know what that means, but I guess they weren't there. And then underneath it says, no one opposed the rezoning at the Planning Commission hearing, and the commission unanimously approved, finding the existing zoning inconsistent with the neighborhood character. Okay? So this was a really big win for your community and for many other communities. Okay? Now, the reason I bring this up is that these rezonings stopped in 2013. We had a new mayor on January 1st, 2014. His name was Bill de Blasio. And, I don't like to speak ill of people, but the one good thing I can say about him is he's a very tall man. Because I'm 6'3", and anybody who's taller than me is a tall man. Bill de Blasio made the statement that all of these contextual rezonings are going to end. We have a housing crisis, and by the way, the housing crisis we've had in New York City has been going on for 76 years straight. I just want to make that very clear. The idea that we are all of a sudden in a housing crisis is hogwash, because we have literally been in a continuous housing crisis since 1948. So, and we're going to get more into that. So, at the time he said, we're not going to do any more of these contextual rezonings. However, the one thing I'll say is, he neglected our communities. But at the end of the day, neglect was okay, in the sense that he wasn't actively looking to do something with our communities. Okay, so starting at the end of 2020, during the pandemic, anybody remember a guy named Corey Johnson? Yeah. Former Speaker of the City Council? Mm-hmm. So in December of 2020, Corey Johnson had a press conference that I happened to accidentally catch on television. And I saw him standing there with 3 other people saying, I'm introducing the most far-reaching land use proposal in the city of New York. It's going to change land use forever. It's called Planning Together. And so, curious as a planner, I looked up his plan. And the first part of his plan was to say, there's data stuff that I'm going to talk about, but the first solution in his plan was to eliminate single-family zoning in the city of New York. Okay. The second part of his proposal was that every community board would have to upzone every decade in perpetuity. And if the community board and the council person couldn't agree on an area to rezone, to upzone, then there would be a new city planning commission over the current city planning commission with a Wizard of Oz-like person on top who would go around and designate areas to upzone if the community and the council person couldn't decide where to do it. So myself and a woman named Renee Hill, who used to be the chair of Community Board 12 in Queens, which is Jamaica, St. Albans, Hollis, this area. She and I created a quick coalition. Out of 59 community boards, I think we spoke at 38 of them in 4 weeks or something like that. And there was a single hearing in February of 2021, and after that hearing, the whole thing died. And it turns out that Corey Johnson was using this as a vehicle to run for comptroller. And we all saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
And now he has his own public relations firm called Kojo. Okay, so isn't that a dog? I think that's Cujo. But close enough.
Sorry, close.
Close. So starting in the summer of 2021, something else happened. We had the resignation of our governor. And we had someone who became governor named Kathy Hochul.
Bucky Beaver.
So in early 2022, I happened to be watching the State of the State address because face it, I'm a big nerd. And I'm one of the 100 people in the city who isn't an elected official who watches this stuff. Because sometimes it's important. And I actually watched it, and she said one sentence that really caught my eye. She said, "We're going to get rid of outdated zoning laws that are holding back housing supply." I said, okay, so I started looking at her plan. So the first part of her proposal was to eliminate single-family zoning across the state of New York, the entire state. Force every municipality in the state to adopt accessory dwelling units, ADUs. We're going to talk about those tonight. Take away what's called home rule, right? Home rule is a very interesting thing. In New York State, most people don't know this, but local governments have as much power as the state government in a lot of areas, including land use. In particular, land use, infrastructure, budget, schools, etc. So oftentimes if the state wants to do something, they actually write a bill, and the bill says, this bill shall become effective upon receiving a home rule message from all cities with 1 million people or more. There's only one city with 1 million people or more. That one is the one that they're talking about, is us. But the point is, that legislation cannot be enacted unless the city signs off on it. That's very different from most other states in the country, where the state government can just impose things on local governments. Okay, so her idea of taking away home rule over land use actually violates the state constitution, section 9 of the state constitution. So I created a group called Save One Family New York. And not only did she want to do the ADUs, she also wanted to increase density, kind of what's going on with the Metro North stations, the transit-oriented development, which we're going to talk about also. And she also wanted to give blanket amnesty for all illegal conversions in the city of New York. Okay, so she took all of this and she stuffed it into the budget bill. She stuffed the legislation into the budget bill. And she had 30 days to take it out without the legislature intervening. So in 2022, what was she doing? She was running for governor for the first time. The Senate and Assembly folks who were allied with her encouraged her to remove everything. She removed almost all of it, except for the blanket amnesty for illegal conversions, which was ultimately taken out by the legislature. Okay, I warned everybody, and this is from a nonpartisan perspective, I warned everybody, if she gets reelected, this is coming back. And last year, she came out with something called the Housing Compact. Anybody remember that? Okay. The Housing Compact was the same thing as what she did in 2022, but even worse. And she was going to do all the same things she did before, but also force every municipality in the state to increase housing every year in perpetuity. And if that municipality didn't do it, then the state would come in and start designating areas where they could build apartment buildings everywhere. It was 1% a year downstate. So that doesn't sound like a lot, but does anybody know how many units we have in New York City? Any idea? Okay, we have 3 million units of housing. So 1% is 30,000 units per year. So if we did not meet that benchmark, then the state would have the ability to start dropping apartment buildings anywhere they want. So again, violating the state constitution. This time, having, roared to a 6-point victory over, and I say that with sarcasm, against Lee Zeldin, she felt enabled to push this, and she refused to take it out of the budget. Do you remember the budget was like 6 weeks late last year? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was because of two things: the housing compact and bail reform. And it wasn't until the Assembly walked out of the negotiations that she finally dropped the housing. However, it came back again this year. And a part of that is affecting you right now. And that is, again, she tried to give blanket amnesty for all illegal conversions and create a basement and cellar legalization across the entire city. The Assembly once again stopped her from doing that. However, there is a pilot program, and boards 9, 10, 11, and 12 in the Bronx are in that pilot program. And you have 90 days to get your community board and your council person to say no, or it will become legal. So for those of you who want this, you know, that's what you want. For those of you who are against it, you should be speaking to Community Board 11, and you should be speaking to your council person about this, because you have basically until the end of June to sort this out.
Wow.
Okay, that plays into what we're dealing with tonight. All of that is the preface to the City of Yes. What is the City of Yes? The City of Yes was divided into 3 sections. The first section passed in December. It was called carbon neutrality. What was carbon neutrality? Well, a lot of energy efficiencies. You know, they're trying to push everything to electrify everything. No more gas is going to be allowed for new construction after 2026. Some of it was okay, some of it was not okay. One of the things that's not okay, which we talked about at a meeting in Staten Island last night, is that they're allowing giant battery buildings, you know, battery farms, to be built all over the city in residential communities. And there are 70 permits out right now. And 44 of the 70 are in Staten Island. One of them's 20 feet from a gas station. That's how crazy all of this is. So I don't want to get too off track, but sorry. A battery farm. What's a battery farm? It's a box. Sorry?
Like a box.
Well, no, it's not like a box. It's like a giant area of transformers, essentially, that's connected to the grid, and it's taking in energy and holding it, and then sometimes selling it back at high cost. But it's meant to be the backup system to help electrify the city. Okay? The problem is that they're allowing these sited next to single-family homes, next to gas stations, next to, you know, on top of buildings, etc. And there have already been several fires that have been impossible to put out just in the last 6 months upstate. They actually had some examples of that. So anyway, that part passed. The city council passed that in December. The second part and the third part are much more intertwined. The economic opportunity and housing opportunity. And tonight I'm going to show you what this is going to do to the city and what this is specifically going to do to your neighborhood. Okay? So it's very important that it's understood that if this becomes law, in my opinion, our communities are finished. And as someone who worked on those contextual rezonings 20 years ago and 15 years ago, and someone who's been advocating for protection of your community, not your community, but all of the communities in the city, I can tell you that this thing is a nuclear bomb. And each part of it is extremely dangerous, but all of it combined is impossible. And even if one part of it gets adopted, our communities are finished. So with that happy note, let's start the presentation. So this is a Twitter posting by the Department of City Planning. They were trying to be cute here with a Taylor Swift reference. And it's a map of New York City, a zoning map from 1989. And this is from October, right when they were rolling out the City of Yes. And the quote that they put in here was, "We've got bad blood with Robert Moses, and we've made a lot of progress to improve New York City zoning, but we're not out of the woods yet. That's why we're chasing our wildest dreams. in City of Yes to shake exclusionary zoning off and say once and for all, welcome to New York. Now, does anybody know what exclusionary zoning is? Okay, do you guys live in this neighborhood? Well, you live in exclusionary zoning. One family, two family zoning, even multifamily zoning that doesn't let developers build to whatever they want, that's all exclusionary. And the mayor is tying exclusionary zoning, meaning homeowners, to racial justice issues. Mm-hmm. Now, I see a very diverse group of people in this room, just as I have in every presentation that I've given all over the city. This is your presentation number 88 in the last 5.5 months, okay? This dog whistle discussion about equity and racial justice is to cover the reality of what this is, which is to replace owner-occupied housing, whatever your ethnic background is, with market rate rental housing. This is not an affordable housing plan, no matter how many times they mention the word affordable. The governor's plans were not affordable housing either. It was to remove zoning to allow developers to build wherever they want. And obviously going completely backwards beyond where we were before the contextual zonings, back to the Stone Age, okay? So, again, statements by the mayor, low density neighborhoods are the cause of the housing crisis. Contextually zoned neighborhoods were a mistake. They have created the housing crisis because we're not allowed to build what we want there in terms of buildings. The zoning resolution of 1961 should have never been adopted because it stopped apartment buildings from being built in 1 and 2 family neighborhoods. These are the kinds of actual statements coming out of the mayor's mouth and the Department of City Planning. So I mentioned Robert Moses. There he is. And I'm sure some of you know who Robert Moses was. Yes, he's a very bad man. He also did some good things, right? So bad man did some good things. Great, some great stuff, right? But as I say to everybody, we are the product of what he did. And some of the stuff he did is terrible and it should be gone. But some of the stuff is exactly 200 feet from this building. And we use it every day, right? So it's kind of a mixed bag. And then of course parks and other things that he did, etc. But let's just say he wasn't the nicest man in the world. Sorry. Here's a few quotes from Robert Moses. Your principal error is this: to imagine that the people's views are of any importance at all. We must advance their fortunes without having any respect for their opinions. You can draw any kind of picture you want on a clean slate and indulge your every whim in the wilderness in laying out a New Delhi, Canberra, or Brasilia, which were brand new capitals being built in the 1950s and 60s, right? But when you operated in an overbuilt metropolis, you have to hack your way with a meat axe. And if you elect a matinee idol mayor, you're going to have a musical comedy administration. So I say the first one, the philosophy of this administration, the second one, the philosophy of this administration, and the third one, a pretty well-deserved description of this administration. Because this is not a serious look at solving the real problems that we have in the city. This is just something to help his donors and his friends make a lot of money. And we are at the collateral damage for that. This is a woman who managed to stop him in one of the things he wanted to do. Her name was Jane Jacobs. She was an urbanist who fought very hard and won to stop one of his signature plans, which was to build the Lower Manhattan Expressway, which would have hooked the Holland Tunnel to the Manhattan Bridge. And it would have destroyed Soho, Tribeca, and parts of the village in doing so. And she was sort of the godmother of the modern preservation movement, which is to protect neighborhoods, whether it's through zoning or through landmarking, etc. And one of her quotes was, cities grow up They just happen, bit by bit. Hand a city to the planners and they'll make it a desert. Hand it to the people and they'll make it habitable. Now, why do I say, as a planner, that she's 100% right? Because the planning that was done for Pelham Gardens and for these other neighborhoods around the city were done with community buy-in, community input, and years of planning and negotiations between the administration, the council members, the community boards, the borough presidents, and the people who live here. And that's why they were very successful. Obviously, what is being proposed, there has been no input. In fact, the City of Yes was created the first week that the mayor was elected. He created a group called the Blast Committee. The Blast Committee was made up of his donors, the biggest real estate and construction companies in the city, as well as housing groups and other government agencies. No community groups, no civic groups, no good government groups. That list of things that they came up with, which is called a developer's wish list, was called the Get Stuff Built list. It was actually produced that way, and that became, for the most part, the City of Yes.
This is Speak Up. This is Sandra Shelby. Till next time, goodbye.